He's kind of like the Joe Rogan of the hospitality industry right now.
This episode is brought to you by Send Squared. To learn more about the HubSpot of hospitality, go to sendsquared.com. And now let's begin today's episode. What's up, Slick Talkers? This episode was originally on Good Morning Hospitality, but we figured it would make sense, since Christian was on Slick Talk not too long ago, to repurpose it here for you to stay up to date and informed on the latest and greatest news of the industry. Now, if you don't know about Mint House, they are a multifamily urban operator and, of course, growing significantly. Christian came in as the CEO, and now they have made their first acquisition of Locale. Back in May of 2021, I had Nitesh, who is the founder of Locale, on the podcast, so you can go back to the old database of Slick Talk content, listen to the episode to hear more about the brand that Nitesh was building and how they built it today, where they got to be acquired by Mint House. Now, super excited about this episode. It's a quick, short interview, and there's going to be plenty more of these type of episodes coming up on the podcast as we are seeing the landscape of brands coming together in order to ensure that the industry is continuously moving forward. I hope you enjoy this interview with Christian Lee, CEO of Mint House. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Good morning. Good afternoon, Christian. Long time no see.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for having me on the pod.
Of course, and say second time, but first time on this podcast at least. So for the listeners who have heard our intro, very exciting news. So I want to congratulate you and the team at Mint House and Locale for the acquisition. How are you feeling? Are you feeling post-acquisition high yet, or do you feel like the work is just now beginning?
A little bit of both. I think it's great to get this deal across the finish line. Partnering with Nitesh has been and continues to be amazing. Super excited about kind of bringing this together, and we'll talk all about the benefits we think come from the deal. But as I told the team when we closed, we did all this work to get to the starting line, right? And now we got to go run the race. And so everyone is well aware that the real action is ahead of us, but we're excited, and we think a bigger platform is a great place for us to be.
Yeah. So let's actually go into that, because I think, like you said, you're at the finish line or the start line now. So it's the race is really beginning, as if it wasn't already, because you guys are been naturally growing Mint House in the portfolio and the brand ever since you took over as CEO. But let's talk about this acquisition. What made it super attractive? I know in the press release, right, there was a combination of stock and cash, but what made it so attractive for the brands to combine together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to two things. So the first is just scale. And, that sounds pretty pedestrian, but we've always believed, and I think most people would say, that scale in the hospitality industry in general is important, as evidenced by the big brands that are out there today. And scale and short-term rental and alternative accommodations is no different. The investment that we've made in the commercial infrastructure, revenue management, corporate sales, data, guest experience, all those things are better when you can leverage them across a broader base of portfolios. But it was really important that we get scale of the right type and in the right places. So when we spent time with Locale, it was clear they shared our real focus on premium multifamily buildings. They hadn't gone into lots of different types of hospitality. They were in, the types of buildings we wanted to be in, and they were in the markets that we wanted to be in. So we're excited because we get deeper in, some markets like Nashville, some of the stuff that's coming in DC, Philly, Dallas, but sort of broader Texas, like a lot of markets where we had some presence. They also had presence, but in different enough, kind of sub-markets and different enough types of buildings that we really feel it's incredibly complementary to what we're doing. And so it was scale, but the right type of scale. The other thing is, sort of we've talked continually with our team, with their team. Nitesh and I talked about kind of the best of both. And, we don't view this as we're just going to take it on and, just sort of mush it all into Mintos. I really think they've done some really interesting stuff in the way that they deliver efficient but high quality guest experience. We've spent a lot of focus on that infrastructure piece I talked about and how to drive the commercial engine, that guest experience engine, all of that. They've done a lot on operating efficiency in really high-end buildings. And so there's a lot that we can learn from each other. And, so that's one of the things that's really, sort of yet to be done in the space is, you have a number of players who are kind of trying to do the same thing, basically.
Yeah.
And the more we put it together and learn from each other, the better I think the guest experience is going to be, the better it is for landlords, the better it is for the companies.
All right, Slick Talkers, many of you are busy running your property management company, so I'm going to make this really quick and really easy. If you listened to a previous episode where I had Justin, the CEO of Fido, on the podcast, you're going to understand that trash is a big issue for a lot of property managers. It causes a lot of regulation issues. It causes a lot of guest satisfaction issues, and of course, headaches for your team who have to somehow remember to pull the bin to the curb for trash day. Well, gone are those days when you get Fido. So go to getfido.com, grab that link in the show notes, let Justin and his team know that you heard about Fido from the podcast, and they're going to take great care of you. If you heard the episode where Justin actually was a guest on the podcast, you'll hear that if you're with a current bin to curb provider, they're going to give you $50 per property that you convert over to Fido today. That's a lot of money in your savings and in your pocket to grow your business. So grab the link right now. Shout out to Fido for sponsoring this podcast, and we are back to the episode. Yeah, and you and I discussed back in September when we actually had you on my other show, but there's actually not as many players in this sector of hospitality anymore due to COVID and a lot of the kind of flood of cash. But you guys have withheld the storm in a lot of ways, and it's really a positive sign. I think this is a good sign because I was reading in the press release that your guys' current investors even helped back this deal through more funding, and that's a sign of confidence in investors where I don't think we see a lot of that anymore. And so to kind of like segue into a question I was kind of curious about, instead of just combining it all into one brand, kind of like you said, do you see Locale's brand becoming like a sub brand of Mint House, like Locale by Mint House, kind of like how hotels do softer brands, or do you guys really do see it becoming one unified front?
We see it becoming one unified front, and nothing, against sort of the Locale brand. I think it's great. It is more that at our scale, the brands that have, multiple, the sort of hotel companies that have multiple brands. I mean, you're talking about just, billions of dollars, it's huge, right? Our idea is that if we can kind of have a pretty singular focus on, premium multifamily buildings and core markets where we have scale within those properties, scale within the market, and then ultimately scale across the US, that we really want to focus. And I think focus means having one brand. So see that coming together. Look, eventually, God willing, we'll be big enough that you'll be able to kind of think about multiple brands. But for now, we think getting the apartment residential hospitality experience right is really the core thing, and that's kind of one brand.
100%. I love that approach. Yeah, when you guys get to that scale, you'll probably be too big to answer my emails for an episode recording.
Never. Well, now you got 2 podcasts. So who knows? You might have 10 podcasts by then.
We have a whole network of podcasts, so who knows? We'll find out if we go beyond it. But I really do like this, and especially because when we talked in September, not to go back to our original episode together, but it's fascinating because you were just getting your toe into Nashville. So now Nashville is going to be a stronger market with the Locale properties and the brand and obviously the team. I want to kind of talk about your guys' approach now. Where do you see the residential hospitality sector growing? Like I said, there's not many big players in this sector anymore. And like you said, there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing. So how do you see your guys' brand evolving? Is there future acquisitions and maybe not like the works, but in interest? I know it's hard to ask that question post closing of this acquisition, but I'm always curious kind of like, where does this lead you guys in the future and the future of the sector? Property managers, if you are trying or still managing your business, manually, then grab this link from Hostfully to get a demo with Frank, who was on the podcast showing the data that they covered for their hospitality industry report that they publish every year at Hostfully. We love the amazing details that they put into this, but also if you're managing bookings and pricing and other tech providers manually without syncing it all together, Hostfully is the property management platform for you. So get with Hostfully. They're actually going to give you $300 off onboarding. So if you use the code HFM300, book a demo with Frank, let him know that you heard about Hostfully from the podcast and that Will sent you. It would mean a lot. And I can't wait for you to streamline your business with Hostfully, from synced bookings to never get a double booking again, to managing all your listings on multiple channels in one platform, automated messaging, and so much more. Shout out to Hostfully. And now we are back to the episode.
Yeah, it's so interesting right now. I'd say what we have seen is that there is increasing interest from multifamily developers of exploring this type of product. And I think people realize that, especially in certain markets, and I wouldn't say they were overbuilt because, again, at a macro level, we still definitely have a housing shortage across the US, but certainly kind of this premium, high-end apartment buildings in certain markets. We do see a lot of new supply continue to come on, and people saying, well, maybe the rents aren't going to do what they did in COVID, right? They're not going to be this 15% a year growth, and maybe they flatline, maybe even certain markets are going down a bit. And you still have this incredible, hospitality. People want to travel. They want to go different places. And there is this real demand for this type of product. People, obviously Airbnb and Vrbo and all these amazing platforms, have this great way of getting into this type of product, but it's not managed, right? So it's not great for business travelers. It's not great, always for families who kind of have to deal with some of the uncertainty and, some of the chores at the end and all of that stuff. So kind of tying that back, on the one hand, you have seen a number of players come out of this space. On the other hand, we are seeing developers more and more interested in this as a way to boost NOI of the buildings and sort of fill up some of that capacity. But you really haven't had a single player who's been able to say, okay, we can kind of go meet that need. And so I think that means more opportunities for, the people who are still, fighting the good fight in this space. But scale is important. And that's why we did this deal. Now, is there other M&A to come? I mean, who knows? Life is long. We obviously feel like we've got, our hands full right now with this integration. And so we're going to do this. We're going to execute on it really well. But we do see that there is a lot of growth potential, just from what we're hearing from multifamily developers really across the board.
For sure. And I read in the press release too that Natasha's staying on. Sounds like the whole Locale team is coming on board and integrating into the brand as well with Mint House. So how do you guys approach that? I'm sure there's a process through the due diligence of like, all right, making sure the tech stack's aligned and that the door codes will still work when guests are trying to get in and all that. So like, how does that kind of process work with you guys, especially with like you said, I think the word scale is pretty significant. It's not, it's not just taking in 20 homes or anything like that. It's taking in multiple buildings with multiple units with multiple different operational stacks. So I'm very curious on that front with you guys.
Yeah. So, two things. So at sort of a tactical level, not to get into kind of all of the nitty gritty details, but we are going to continue to run them, as separate entities for some period of time, right? 90 days, 100 days, whatever that is. So it will still be Locale. It will still be Mint House. For exactly the reason you mentioned, right? We didn't want to do a switch over day one and all of a sudden, wait, what's going on? Where's my reservation? So we're keeping it, separate in that sense, from a consumer perspective. And so, we have reporting lines set up, their team, our team. Everyone's pretty clear on what needs to get done. And the mission, the sort of directive to all the employees is, hey, we're developing an integration plan. And some people are kind of involved in that. We've been doing a lot of that work, as you can imagine, before we even closed, of course. But, kind of business as usual for now. And then we're doing that work of how, what's the PMS? What's the customer care system? And again, we have a lot of planning in place already. But now that, we've actually closed the deal, we're kind of bringing that to, a more detailed, granular plan and working through all those details so that it will be seamless once we switch everything over.
I love it.
For better or for worse, it's sort of one of the things I did for 20 years of my career was acquisitions and integrations and all that. And some of the folks that I've brought over and worked with me doing that. So I'd say collectively as a team, we have a lot of experience in that. And we kind of know how to run the play.
So you can do this in your sleep, basically, is what you're saying. You know how to...
No, nothing's ever in the sleep, but we at least kind of know how to think about it. We want to start with the systems because you've got to get that right. From there, then you can get into the branding, and then you get into, the marketing, and you can kind of go down the stack of kind of order of operations. But the most important thing is getting the systems ready so that it's really a seamless transition. And you kind of have that Hippocratic oath of first do no harm. Make sure everything continues to work. Then when you put it together, have it be a really wonderful experience that works for guests, but also really it has to work for employees, right? You can't make things more complicated for employees. We can't have two sets of systems that people have to go back and forth on. And so we really want to get that piece right. And we think that if we do that, that will really drive efficiencies for the combined organization and ultimately allow us to scale even more efficiently going forward.
For sure. So have you already had conversations with kind of tech partners? Because I know Nitesh was really strong about being more tech enabled, good design as well, right? Like that's super important for the end user, the customer that is in a locale or in a Mint House property, design forward, but ease of access, ease of this. So how does that kind of go with your guys' tech partners or integration partners that you have on the back end? Do you guys have those conversations slow over time, or I'm sure they're probably not, fighting at the heel to get everything going? But I'm just kind of curious.
Not slow. We're going to go quickly. Again, we want the guests to I tell the team, we need to be ready on everything quickly. Let's take our time on actually switching it over so that we don't, make any mistakes there. But there's a huge amount of work that happened before the deal closed and obviously continues now on making those decisions of what the right, tech solution is. And I think that one of the things we talked about a little bit last time, and I think is worth bringing up again, is the way the world is now. There's so many interesting technology solutions out there. So maybe even 5, 10, 15 years ago, you would have had to build a lot of it on your own. And I'm sure you've had so many, hospitality tech companies on the platform, and they're all doing kind of interesting different things. And so one of the things we really believe in is, okay, basically outsource, use third-party tech where you can, because there's so much of it that works really well, and then build on top of that the pieces, or customize the pieces you need to customize, to really deliver an amazing guest experience. And so we will take that philosophy. Nitesh had that same philosophy. That was one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about. And so now we just kind of make a few choices on, which we're going to use and how to best kind of build the platform going forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess my final question to you is, vision, right? Where does your vision for Mint House go post-acquisition? Now that you guys do have more scale, you're in deeper markets, more markets to come, like in the press release, Washington, D.C. is on the list for 2025, hopefully. So would love to see, where do you see this going? I know we had vision, talk kind of before, but this kind of changes things up a little bit. So I'd love to know how that shifts.
Yeah, but it really doesn't. I mean, that's the thing. This is sort of a fulfillment of part of the vision of getting to scale in apartment, hospitality, residential hospitality. It's a very similarly aligned culture. They think about things the same way we do, which is guest experience first, being in really Class A premium buildings, but then also being super efficient in how you deliver that guest experience. And so over time, again, going back to what I said before on the market side, we know that there's more and more demand for this, the functionality and comfort of home, right? People want to stay this way. And that's true, of course, for younger travelers, but it's really true across the board. We're especially seeing it now with business travelers where, still in a remote hybrid world, maybe you work someplace, but you have to go back to corporate headquarters, but you're going in for a week at a time. So a hotel is fine, but if you can be at a place that has a kitchen and, a living room and it really feels more enjoyable, that's great. And so people want that type. We're going to do more of that. And then, but for us, it's like, how do you deliver that experience as efficiently as possible? And so, meeting guests where they want to be, right? So, text and AI chatbots integration to kind of really make sure that we're answering as quickly as possible with having as few, humans in the loop as possible. But really importantly, having that human there when it's needed, right? I mean, that hospitality piece is big. And if you can, book and you can get your instructions and you get into the room with the code and the Wi-Fi works and, you need something and you just send a text, that's all great, right? That's what we want. But for that, 5% of the times, whatever, something happens, you can't quite figure it out. You still want a human being who's either in, person or available, for a call or something else. And so continuing to invest in all that and then continuing to invest in personalization. We think that's a really core part of what, this platform can provide, right? That, we have a refrigerator, we have a kitchen. So, hey, I want to have XY meal and I always, have my macrobiotics or I only eat vegan. So, hey, I want this stuff to show up in the refrigerator before I get there. Great. We can make that happen. Hey, we're dealing with, apartments. So I want my temperature set at this. I want this or this. And that ability to use technology to meet people where they are and to really deliver that amazing guest experience without having to have huge numbers of people on the property to do that, right? And so I think that kind of combination of things is similar to what we've thought about. It's similar to the way we thought about it, the way Nitesh thought about it. And this just gives us more scale to invest in those types of guest care, personalization, and tools to drive efficiency, but also that great guest experience.
Yeah, the door codes, getting to the unit, booking online, maybe some AI, stuff is table stakes. The rest is where the real work begins and the fun part for 100%. Hospitality is. So I love that. Totally. I love that. Well, Christian, congratulations again to you and the team. Congratulations to Nitesh. Hopefully you're listening. Long time no see, my friend, and congrats to the, both teams. I think this is very exciting for our industry. It shows signs of investor confidence. I'm excited for a brand to start standing out inside of the urban residential space outside of the, COVID era that we saw. And yeah, just want to say thank you for joining us and kind of sharing some insight on the deal. It's very exciting.
Now, thanks for having me. Anytime. Thanks for all you're doing in the space and kind of the way that you're raising the profile of everyone who's doing this. So really appreciate it and look forward to talking again soon.
Of course. Well, like you heard it here first, morning people. We'll grab the links in the show notes, read the press release, and of course, check out all things Mint House and Locale. Until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.